Hi, this is Frank McNally from Public Spend Forum. I'm excited about a new series we're going to be bringing to you called Damn Good Contracting Forms. Why? Because contracting forms are kind of a headache. Have you ever noticed they don't really have great instructions? And sometimes when they do have great instructions, there's still a lack of clarity. Now, I know a lot of offices have internal policies, but if you can't get your hands on some of those and you just want an overview of some of the more common contracting forms that we see, especially those that are required for market research, I think this series is going to be very helpful for you. And we're going to start this series with the DD 2579, the Small Business Coordination Record. This is a really common form in defense contracting, and it's used to demonstrate how small businesses will be or have been given an equitable opportunity to participate in an acquisition. Now, we all know that as a matter of policy, small and disadvantaged businesses should be afforded every opportunity to compete and win government work. That's really strong belief, long held in public sector contracting, and I think it's something that we can all agree is important. Small businesses deserve the opportunity to compete for and win contracts, but sometimes they need an advantage, and that's why we set contracts aside. So as we go through each section of this form, we're going to share some tips and tricks on how to complete the information. There's instructions here from PGI that's really helpful, and in the blog that's accompanying this particular case study series, we're going to have the links that you might need to look at PGI, look at DFARS, look at Federal Acquisition Regulation guidance, which you will need to do in order to complete these forms effectively. So Section 1 of the DD 2579 form, this is all about administrivia. It's a bit of a commodity code goose chase, so to speak, but we'll make that really easy for you with some of the search features that GovShop offers. Section 2 is where you get to actually make your recommendation. You'll feel like a business professional when you get to this part of the small business coordination record. It's the result of your market research. It's what you believe should be done. It is a professional judgment decision. In Section 3, Blocks 12 and 13 of this DD 2579 form, we talk about consolidation and bundling and subcontracting plans. Definitely a concept that can trip people up, so we want to spend a little bit of time describing what these particular things are and what you need to know about them to complete these sections. Section 4 is the acquisition history. That's Block 14. Now, as you know, if something has been previously set aside for the small business community, it is oftentimes going to remain set aside for the small business community. So the acquisition history is an important part. If it's a new requirement, you really don't have to do much here. If this is something that has been awarded already or is already on contract, you're going to have to spend a little bit more time in Section 14. Finally, Section 5, you're finished. You get to route this document for approval. There's several individuals that will need to sign off on this thing. I emphasize patience and professionalism during this process. You'll have spent some time and invested energy into this form. You're going to make a recommendation that you believe in that's based on your professional judgment, and therefore you're likely to feel a degree of ownership over this form. You're going to take it personally if someone disagrees with you, or if somebody wants more information or says your form is insufficient. Resist the temptation to take that personally. Other people are going to sign off on this. They're going to put their signature in wet ink on this form, and that means they're attesting to its validity. So they have a right to ask follow-up questions, and hopefully they do that professionally. But we always want to emphasize patience and professionalism when you're routing these forms and when you get feedback. Take it like an adult. Resist the temptation just to get back into some, long-term email exchange. Pick up the phone and call the individual. Drop by their office to see them and talk it out like a human being, and you'll resolve these comments a lot quicker. Okay, so that's the introduction. We're going to go through these sections again, sort of detail by detail, and as we do, want to show you some tricks and tips that'll help you complete these forms a little bit more efficiently. All right, let's get started. All right, so the first section of this DD 2579 form is primarily administrative. Block 1 is a control number that the small business office can use if they want to track forms. You've got a procurement request number, a PR request number. There's the estimated value of the contract with options, a procurement instrument identifier, and some other sort of blocks there like your name, your office code and symbol, email address, and telephone number. These are all self-explanatory. Now, if you don't have Adobe Reader or you're unable to complete PDFs online, you may have the interest in this online tool I found called templateroller.com. Template Roller has a lot of the standard forms and DD 2579 forms hosted on their site, and it's really easy to fill the forms out with Template Roller. So again, our first section, you can fill in your information right here, and I'm just gonna make up things, but this is PR 2021. That's my first procurement request for the year. Lucky me. Maybe it's a $50,000 purchase order with all options. The PIID, that's again the procurement instrument identifier. There's FAR guidance on how to fill that out. The supplementary procurement instrument would be for any modification or amendment that you're doing. My name, and it wants it last, middle, first, of course. So Frank H. The DOD AAC number, that's your activity address code. So if you don't know what this is, just ask somebody in your office who's been there longer. They can probably help you with that. I could put my email address in here, terrible typer, and my phone number. Now it gets down to the what I'm actually buying here. This is the description in 7A, the item or service description. So let's pretend that I support a customer, and they basically work for the DoD's mechanic. They're the vehicle servicers. So I'm to buy wire harnesses. Now I'm not exactly sure what the wire harnesses are for, so I'm going to have to do some strategic research here and try to understand automotive repair in the defense industry and see if I can figure out what exactly they need, because wire harnesses could be anything. So I'm going to show you a little bit of how that looks, how that strategic market research can look. So I start all of my strategic market research in Google because it's just a great place to go. So if I just type in wire harness on Google, I'm going to get a number of suggestions, and I love Google suggestions because basically it's crowdsourcing recommendations for me. So I'm seeing wiring harness, wire harness assembly, wire harness tape, connectors, wrap, repair, clips, all of these things related to this wire harness. I'm not exactly sure still what I'm buying yet, so I'm just gonna kind of look at the whole kit and caboodle. Okay, so I've got wire harness assemblies, with a lot of, looks like just this is a Google ad. I've got images, so it looks like there's automotive wire harnesses, motorcycle, engine, car. Okay, so right off the bat, just looking at, the images results here, wire harness, I can tell this is going to be something in the automotive realm, which makes sense, right? My customer is a car manufacturer. So, what is a wiring harness? I can look and see what Google's telling me. What is a wire harness used for? Let's check that out. Cable wiring assembly. Okay, so wire harness in a car. So Quora results are always really good. So the wiring harness system carries energy in an electrical system used for, like starting the engine, power. Okay. I'm starting to understand more about what a wiring harness is. So let's just look. So it looks like Amazon has some wiring harnesses, and it's an automotive replacement. So so this is clearly changing my understanding of what these things are, which is good. So I'm knowing this is now an automotive replacement part. It's an electrical system. So it's a wire harness, not to dangle from the sky, but it's a wire harness, for some sort of automotive repair. Now, as I'm doing this market research, GovShop has a pretty useful tool for collecting keywords that are relevant to that strategic market research, and you can download it right here. It's called the keyword template. So it just downloads a quick automatic download. It'll open up in Microsoft Word. And here we have it. I can manipulate this tool. I'm just going to say this is my wire harness acquisition. And I'm going to include some keywords. So I know that it's an automotive part. It's electrical wiring. I'm going to tell you why this is going to be important in a minute, but it's electrical wiring. It's an automotive replacement. What else did we learn from this? So this wiring harness, I'm just going to find all the keywords that I can and start to write those down, because eventually I'm going to have to enter in some commodity codes. That's part of this particular block. We're going to have to write down the product service code, the NAICS code, and the size standard in blocks 7B, C, and D. So in order to do that, we're going to have to use a NAICS code lookup. When I set out to do the commodity code research, it's really helpful to have my keyword template. I have sort of deduced that automotive replacement parts might be not specific enough, because I know that this is an electrical piece, this wire harness. So electrical equipment for vehicles, I think, is going to return better results for me. So what I can do is use GovShop's commodity code search to figure out what product service codes and NAICS codes map to my keywords. So from this page, we can actually search across product service codes, NAICS codes, NIGP codes, which are used for state and local governments, and some special public spend forum market categories that we have specifically developed. So let me put in my search query, electrical equipment for vehicles, and it's going to return some results for me. And as we see, that's 2,564 commodity codes, and that's pulled across the public spend forum markets, PSC codes, NAICS codes, and NIGP. Let's start with NAICS codes. I'm interested in the NAICS codes first. I need the NAICS code and the PSC code for my DD 2579. So let's look at NAICS codes. Okay, so just applying that filter gives me 500 commodity codes in the NAICS category. That's a lot. I mean, we're always trying to improve this search, and we will, but it is definitely in the right category, and I can see it has brought the most relevant results to the top. So it's motor vehicle parts manufacturing, motor vehicle electrical, and electronic equipment manufacturing. Clearly that's where we want to be with this wiring harness. So the landing page for the NAICS codes, really useful, gives us some information on what this industry comprises, and even if we click read more, it gives us some illustrative examples. And you'll see as you read about halfway down that list, ignition wiring harnesses for internal combustion engines manufacturing. Okay, so now we've got a NAICS code 33632, and I can copy that, and I'm going to put it right into my form. Okay, so I'm back over here in this template roller editable DD 2579 form, and I'm ready to put in my NAICS code that I've just copied over. So it's 33632. That's the NAICS code that I've found from my GovShop research. Now I do got to go back over and find the product service code. So I can go back to my results on the commodity code search and now filter for PSC codes. And so it gives me 740 commodity codes that return for the search query electrical equipment for vehicles. That's a lot. Sometimes it helps to try a different search with PSC codes. So why don't I just try a wire harness for this one? Let's just see if that gets us. Okay, so 20 commodity codes. Because PSC code's a little bit more specific, you can definitely use PSC codes. So I've got a few that I can look through here. 20 is definitely a manageable list. And, I'm just going to start looking through these. So the first one I looked at, the PSC code, the parent 61, I see, motors electrical 6105, feeling like that's definitely, electrical wire, power distribution equipment, motors electrical. Clearly, I know wire harnesses are used in the combustion engine and the like through my market research. So this product service code definitely matches. I'm confident that I can put that into my DD 2579 form right here, and I'm on my way. Now, I did something in reverse here. The NAICS code is actually something I use to determine the size standard, so I still have a little bit of research here to do, and that's not easy, but I'll show you how to do that as well. So here is the table of size standards. This is where you'll be directed when you go to determine your size standard determination. This is on the Small Business Administration website, Now you have to use the NAICS code to determine the size standard. So I've got to go to the Electronic Code of Federal Regulations, and it gives me this long HTML list. It's not searchable, unfortunately. So I've got to use Control F function to search this effectively. Okay, so using Control F, I actually see that I need to do append to 0 on my NAICS code, but that is the description that I'm looking for, and I can see here that the size standard for small businesses in this NAICS code category is 1,000 employees. Now, if there was a dollar figure here in the left-hand column, that would mean that its size standard was determined by annual revenue. But for this industry, size standard and a small business standard is determined based on how many employees a company has. So if they have under 1,000 employees, small business. Over 1,000 employees, large business, or other than small business. And that's for the industry to attest. So when you set something aside for small businesses in this NAICS code, businesses understand whether or not they qualify as a small or other than small business. Okay, so that's a lot of searching, but with GovShop and especially the commodity code search, we can make that a lot easier for you. Okay, so we're finally done with section 1 of the 2579. Now we can move on to section 2. Well, congratulations on completing all the administrivia of section 2 of your DD 2579 form. If your idea of a good time is using your professional judgment to make actual business recommendations, well, you're in for a treat in section 2. Let's hop back over into the fillable form, and I'm going to show you those sections and show you how you can use GovShop and some other resources to complete that quicker. Right, so here we are. So section 2 starts in block 10 with the recommendation that you, the contracting professional, is going to make. And this recommendation is related to whether or not you're going to set this procurement aside for small businesses. And obviously we know there's specific sections of socioeconomic concerns, 8As, service disabled veteran-owned small businesses, WASBs, and the like. You may decide that it's appropriate to set aside this contract for one of those concerns. Now, the way that you do that is by using the rule of 2 for small business set-asides. And the rule of 2 essentially dictates that if there are 2 or more qualified small businesses capable of doing the work, and you believe you can get a fair and reasonable price for the items from those concerns, then you should set it aside for that category. Now, how do we make a rule of 2 determination? You can use SBA's dynamic small business search. I used that tool coming up and was never really satisfied with it. I didn't think it worked that well. So we created filters in GovShop to make searching for and finding small and socioeconomically disadvantaged businesses a lot easier. So that's what I'm going to show you here. So here we are back in GovShop at the commodity code landing pages for the product service code that we identified for electrical wire power distribution equipment. So you'll see here in our table that 61 of the PSC code, that's the sort of the parent root. So there's multiple product service codes underneath that root 61, and we can look at those and make a determination of where we think the most relevant suppliers might be. And so if you scroll down and just kind of read through these choices, you'll get to PSC code 6145, wire and cable electrical. I think this is a great place to look for our wire harnesses. So 4,000 suppliers, that's quite a lot of suppliers. What we can do is use the browse and filter function for GovShop. Now, the browse and filter function is really useful. So here we are, we're still sorting the supplier profiles by that product service code 6145. But what I want to do is show you how you can use some of these filters to find out sort of the socioeconomic density, so to speak, of this particular set of suppliers. So, okay, so once I go to browse and filter amongst all of these suppliers that are mapped to product service code 6145, I can see there's a lot of them, so I'm going to enter in a keyword modifier because wire harness is a pretty good keyword for this particular section. Okay, so now we've got 543 suppliers. We were at like 4,000 ultimately that were mapped to this product and service code, but using the keyword wire harness, I'm now down to 543. That's still a lot, but it's manageable. So let's filter this list. And what I want to do is filter first for firms that are registered with government, because I'm really only interested in buying this, from a company that's already got their SBA registration or their SAM.gov. So that only took one supplier off there. Okay, let's try the small business filter. So I'm going to put the small business filter on and see what that brings us. Does it knock down 100 and something? Okay, so that's 400 suppliers that are small businesses registered with government. So what I can do now is start to look at maybe some individual set aside. So I can look at hub zones and see, okay, so there's 15 hub zones. That's good to know. I can select all of them and add them to a list, and I'll have to create the list first, and there's a way to do that. So to create our list, I've got to add a new list first, and I'm just going to say this is my wire harness DD2579 report, and I'm going to say this is the socioeconomic breakdown of prospective suppliers. Okay, I can make the list public if I choose. I won't today. So now I've created that list, and I'm going to add all 15 of these to the wire harness report. Save to list. Boom. Okay, now let's see about SBAs. How many SBAs are there out of this? 19. Okay, select all. And then there's two ways to add to list. The other one is just from group actions, add to list. Boom. Done. Let's see about SDVOSBs. 401 down to 43. So that's great. So I'm going to select them all, and I'm going to add them to my list. There we go. Okay, so let's just keep ticking on down. Look at small disadvantaged businesses. 8 of those. Okay, select, add to list, wire harness. And you get the drift all the way down to WASBs, women-owned small businesses, 130. Okay, so again, I select all, and I add them to my list. And now I've got 176 suppliers on that wire harness list. And let's go and take a look at that. And we're going to see 176 suppliers in this DD2579 market research list. Now, the cool thing, because I also have to make the recommendation, is I can create a summary report. So this is my wire harness socioeconomic analysis. And if I was building this out, I would probably write a pretty good description in here. So give me a minute and I'll do that. Okay, so I just created a basic summary of this report, because what I can do when I export this, it's going to make a nice attachment for my file. So I've said this is a market research analysis of over 4,000 suppliers mapped to product service code 6145 and then filtered by all the socioeconomic categories using GovShop. Let's create that report. And it's a really nice artifact. Like I said, this is going to make your job a lot easier, because you're always asked to show your work when you do these things. How did you get all this? Basically, how are you making these recommendations? What research did you do? So here's the market research report. So we've seen 176 small businesses. We can see them broken down by the number that map to the particular set-aside category: SBAs, hub zones, SDVOSBs, SDBs, and WASBs. So clearly, I could make a pretty good recommendation to set this aside for WASBs, SDVOSBs, well, frankly, all of them, because they all technically match the rule of 2. But you can just see the density there, and you have to use your own, business judgment. You'll probably need to go back into some of these lists and look at the suppliers and really analyze them and make sure, are all 122 or are all 19 really wire harness manufacturers? But, that's just part of market research. Thankfully, with GovShop, you have more time to do that, because you're spending less time clicking all around and, doing an RFI or anything like that. So that's basically section 2. You're going to come back in and you're going to make a determination for a small business set aside. I believe you could do that 100%. And I think we will likely set this aside for women-owned small businesses. And then in 11A, we're going to write what we did for this market research. So now that we've done all that research, we can complete section 2 of our DD 2579. So I'm going to recommend a small business set aside. I mean, clearly there's over 100 suppliers in the small business community that can provide this. And because I found over 100 women-owned small businesses, I mean, that would be my initial recommendation. Obviously, we're going to have to do a little bit more research. Now we can start to get into the completing section of this as we move on to section 3. And Section 3 deals with consolidation, bundling, and subcontracting plans. This is a concept that does seem to give acquisition professionals some trouble consolidating or bundling your requirement. It's a bit more advanced than the focus of this particular tutorial, but let's talk about it real quick. So we do have to, as you see, make a selection on whether or not we're going to bundle or consolidate this contract. Now, bundling, okay, basically it's something that you can do when you combine requirements or you combine similar acquisitions into one acquisition. And sometimes, historically, this would be done to increase the value of a contract so that it would be above the simplified acquisition threshold and therefore not automatically set aside. So they do have these rules around consolidation or bundling. You can do it, but you have to sort of adhere to the FAR guidance at subsection 7.107-3. So bundling, if you're going to do it, you need to have a business case for it. That's about all I can say on that. So make the selection and be prepared to defend it, I guess, is the bottom line there. For a subcontracting plan, if you don't set it aside, you will typically have to consider a subcontracting plan. Any contractor that receives a contract over the simplified acquisition threshold must agree that small businesses will have the maximum practical opportunity to participate in contract performance, and that's from FAR section 19.702. So you can read the statute there and understand a little bit more about your subcontracting. So that's Section 3. Section 4 of the DD 2579 is an acquisition history. Specifically, what happened with the prior contract? Was it set aside for small businesses? If this is a new requirement, you will be able to skip the sub-blocks here and go right to Section 15 or Block 15. If it's not, if it's already been acquired, this product or service has already been acquired, you'll have to fill out whether it was set aside, and if so, was it set aside for any specific socioeconomic concerns. Now, just note, historically and traditionally, if something is set aside for the small business community, it tends to stay in the set-aside program for the duration of its existence. It's not a firm rule, but it's basically kind of a rule of thumb. So if you are setting something aside, note that it's probably going to stay set aside, and if the last acquisition was set aside for small business, it's probably going to also be set aside. The future acquisition will also be set aside for that same small business. So just note that as you complete the acquisition history section. And in Section 5, we get to do the dance of the routing approvals. Now, when I was a contracting professional, we would put these printed out documents, these plans, into sort of a document. I guess it was a folder they called the Holy Joe, and it was a routing folder. And it was super old school, like it would tie down with one of those little rope or yarn sort of ties. You'd wind it around the circular holder, and you would literally send this around to the different offices. Now, what's important to understand here is, it's going to take time, right? Everybody that is required to put their name and signature on this thing deserves the opportunity to review it. And so don't expect if something's routed that it's going to get done in an afternoon, or, that just because somebody has it on their desk that they should be automatically, completing this and getting onto it. They're signing it. They're attesting to the information within. And if it takes them a little bit of time to review, that's understood. Now, if it's a lot longer than normal, that can sometimes warrant a call. And, sometimes these things don't have to be signed in order. So if somebody's, busy or can't get to it for a while, you can always ask, would it be possible if I take it to the next person and then bring it back here for your review? They might not accept that, but just something to keep in mind. So as we see in Section 5, these are all the officials that will have to sign off on this DD 2579 form. It's not a bad touch to fill this out with their name and contact information if you know it. It just makes it easier for them. They don't have to fill that. They just have to sign it. So that's it. That's your DD 2579 tutorial. So you can see how these things can take a little bit of time, but with the right tools and the right resources, you can actually get them done rather efficiently and get on with your job. All right, thanks so much for watching this tutorial, and we'll see you next time.